Everybody, this is Craig Tanner for the Mindful Eye and the photo of the week on the Daily Critique. This week's photo of the week was created by Deborah, who is an intermediate photographer from Virginia. Deborah shot this image with a Nikon D80, a Nikon 200mm macro lens, so after the 1.5 crop factor conversion, this becomes a long telephoto shot, 300mm. Exposure trio, ISO 400, f7.1 and 1/60th of a second. And her backstory, Deborah says this photo was taken in Meadowlark Gardens in Vienna, Virginia. She says she stood up to take a break from shooting flowers on the ground, working with her macro lens, when she saw this squirrel on the rock. She said she really liked the way the squirrel's tail seemed to fit into the arch of the tree trunk, and so that affected the way she framed the shot. She said this happened so fast she didn't even have time to reset her camera controls from shooting the flowers. So let's get into it. Deborah, in her backstory, mentions that one of the things that she sees, even though this happened really fast, is this repetition of the C-curve of the squirrel's tail and how it sort of fits like a puzzle into the framing element of the tree. And I love the way that she has framed the shot from left to right to leave some negative space over here in front of the implied movement, but to bring the tree in here is a really powerful repeating, unifying element and also framing element of design. This image is such a powerful image at the level of repetition. You have a whole series of C-curves that are repeating over and over and over again, particularly moving on the x-axis in the image. You have all those C-curves and this real dynamic body language and gesture of the squirrel. It gets repeated here in the contouring line. Deborah sees that when she takes the shot. Because of the pattern texture in the tree, it continues to get repeated across the space of the tree. Gets repeated in a lot of these suggestions of contouring lines in the background, and also suggestions of positive and negative space when it comes to both color and value ideas. There's a lot of implied circular energy in the background. Another place that C-curve repeats that to me is just outrageous is in the face of the rock. It's a lot more subtle, but you see it repeating here. It's repeating in a real powerful way. It's sort of like a coda or parentheses to one of, if not the dominant C-curve in the whole shot, and that's happening on a real dynamic diagonal in the shot. Really beautiful sort of unifying dynamic bit of design in the image. And it's not just the C-curve that repeats. There's another implication of geometry and shape that repeats throughout the image that's incredibly powerful. We could start right here because this is our main subject. When I look here, I get the sense of sort of two design elements, the C-curve and then this geometry right in here. It's a lot boxier, but it has a feel and a vibe to it. And that gets repeated over and over and over again. We could look at the squirrel and where it shows up right here on the rock. Again, it's like the idea of the puzzle. This positive space shape can move right into this negative space shape. On the other side of the rock, the same thing is happening, suggested in a big way. And the tree trunk, it's happening in a variety of ways, both big and small. If we want to talk again about the pattern and texture of the bark, but then implication of energies that are much bigger, it's also happening back here in the background. Pretty amazing image at the level of rhythm. And it's interesting to me that Deborah sees this as an opportunity, and then this other rhythm is there as well. And people will get cynical every once in a while. I'll get an email from somebody and they'll say, hey, you mentioned all these things, but they're happening in shots where photographers, there's no way they can see all this. I'll even get emails from the people that take the pictures and say, well, it's neat that you pointed all that out, but I never saw it. But they chose the image to submit. And a lot of times they are images that have a big effect on people. The thing is, at some point in our process, we do have to choose. No one that I've ever known of unconsciously edits their work. They don't put a blindfold on and do that work in the blind. And so these ideas are important to me to see if you're interested in the concept of composition and traditional design, where you are definitely concerned with whether you're creating a unifying feeling for the viewer, whether you're creating tension. And when it comes to principles of design, to me, two of the most powerful are repetition and then dynamic use of proportion, and we're seeing that in the shot too. You have this negative space that suggests this space shape that repeats in the image. It's very small here, and then almost in a sequence getting much bigger as we move across the image. That dynamic proportion is powerful. It happens all in here in this part of the image. You have the tail of the squirrel positive space shape wrapping around this negative space shape that's much bigger, and then you have this big negative space shape wrapping around the circular feeling of the squirrel, a positive space shape that's much smaller. And so this idea of dynamic proportion just reversing on itself in a real powerful way if we want to consider the squirrel and the area behind it. Speaking of that, love the shallow depth of field here and how that's really helped to simplify. You know, going back to Deborah's backstory, in a perfect world it would have been great if she could have opened up a little bit more, maybe thrown this out of focus even more, and gotten to a faster shutter speed. I'm amazed that she was able to get the sharpness that she has pulled off here, to my eye, hand holding 300 millimeters effectively at a 60th of a second. Another thing I love in this image is the simplicity of the way textures show up. Each subject has a different type of texture, and that helps to create dynamic differences in all of these subjects: the rock, the ground, the bark on the tree, out of focus back here, and then the fur of the squirrel. All those textures are different. That's really beautiful. Even though this image seems to have some kind of color cast, in some places maybe a little bit red, and then there's a lot of reflected green that's coming from the background, I love the way the squirrel itself, particularly right in here, pushes real close towards a visual sea level. You get a sense of gray and white and black in here. It's still a little bit warm, but it gets pretty close to a neutral. Helps the squirrel to separate, but I think it also helps Deborah to get away with some color casting that's happening here. The main subject sort of becomes a color anchor. A couple of other things I love about this image. I love the fact that the squirrel not only has this real dynamic body language, profile is showing that off, shallow depth of field helps it to separate, the sharpness of the texture of the fur does too. It's sitting on this real dynamic place on the rock, and then the rock is tilted, and all that creates this continuation, even in the base of the rock, of this real beautiful implied dynamic energy. Love the gesture, the suggestion of hands, such a powerful archetype, and then just the archetype of the squirrel as a forager and nut gatherer, and that's playing out here. Another thing that I wanted to mention here that can be real powerful when we have a wild subject that's a wildlife, or a subject that's a person, or a subject that can imply a real strong sense of movement in one direction, of energy. The tree is even doing that here. It can work really well to have that move against the sort of natural way that most people in the world that are viewing media with the English being the international language, naturally we're moving in this direction, and to push back against that can be a powerful bit of tension that helps viewers to stay in the image longer. These two forces in the image are countering each other, instead of having the squirrel turn the way and all the energy pushing in this direction where we could quickly sort of fall out of the image. So many things to enjoy about this really beautiful wildlife shot of Deborah's. I want to say a big thank you to her for submitting it. At the end of the video here, I want to encourage you along the lines of something that we are putting in our most recent e-news. Our daily critique submissions are way up, but our photo of the week submissions are way down for some reason. We'd love to have you look at your favorite images, your best images, and submit those for photo of the week. We'd also love to be getting more submissions for the sort of new feature on the daily critique called the daily critique in the digital darkroom. We're looking for your images where you have either an image that you haven't done much to in the darkroom, you'd like to see how we would approach processing the image, or you have specific questions regarding processing. All you have to do is use the same daily critique submission form just in the backstory section of that page at the top of that area where you type in your backstory, write digital darkroom submission. Love to get more of those types of submissions. Thanks again to Deborah. Thank you so much to you for being here. Hope you have a great weekend. Hope to see you again real soon on The Mindful Eye.